In the past couple of years, I've played a lot of visual novels, and I mean a lot. There were a few I had to pay for, but there was a good chunk of visual novels that are free. If you want to play good visual novels and you're poor or just cheap, I've got 8 of them to recommend. Number 8, Lily's Day Off. This is one of the strangest games I've played, which I want to refer to as one of the darkest games I've played, but I'm gonna have to retract that statement. Anyways, Lily's Day Off is very unique compared to other visual novels because your choices have a much larger impact on the story than most other visual novels do. In most visual novels, you make a choice and it makes a slight change to the in-game universe. However, in Lily's Day Off, it makes a huge change to your in-game universe. In all possible scenarios, you find Lily crying in your neighborhood with no memory of anything that happened to you previously. However, you do recall that Lily is a famous pop star. Then you decide to talk to her. I will refrain from saying what the available options will lead to avoid spoilers. This time. The game is also really short, so it shouldn't take too long to go through all the endings. There's not really much else to say about the game other than the fact that you can change Lily's outfit, but that's all it does. Number 7, I don't know. I'm not even sure how this game's title is supposed to be pronounced. I'm also not good with Japanese names, so that's a great combination. Anyways, this game stars a high school student by the name of Seal who watches a movie that reminds him of a close childhood friend at the beginning of the game. A lot of the game involves him hanging out with his current friends, but someone he worked with on that movie needed to talk to him. He also has a crush on her, so of course he would. His main goal is to end up in a relationship with the director, but that depends on the choices the player makes, as do a lot of these games. So he could possibly end up with someone else or no one at all. At times this game can get really creepy as well as really weird. The story is pretty good, but the lack of background music or any background sound can cause a bit of disinterest from the player. That's not the only problem though. There are many misspelled words and grammatical errors, which can be quite distracting to the player. But those are the only areas I find the game flawed. Number 6, Sepia Tears. This is another short visual novel. However, it's a lot more linear, not requiring too much player input, as in making decisions. It's not a bad thing. The game happens to be a good example of quality over quantity. The story involves a guy named Mark, his little sister Rin, his friends Lucas and Lillian, and a girl named Mira who decides to annoy him. The game mainly focuses on Mark, and the player must help him make decisions which may or may not affect the story a lot. The other major character would have to be Mira, who claims to be his childhood friend, but Mark remembers nothing about her, when she knows a lot about him. Thinking knowing more about her would get his memory of her back, he asks her some questions which she refused to answer. As you go through the game, you can see the characters develop and sometimes undo that development immediately after. You'll even go through a bit of backstory, which is really just how the characters met. In the end, the game was really well written, so the lack of story branches isn't a problem. I've gone through the entire game and only found 3 endings, and one of the bad endings had me wondering what the hell I just experienced. In the end, I think there's a lot you can learn from this game. Well, if you get the good ending anyways, but I won't spoil that for you. Number 5, Asagao Academy Normal Boots Club. Don't know if anyone was ever expecting this game to exist, but it's here. A visual novel where you can date all the YouTubers from Normal Boots, all of whom providing their voices for their in-game characters. Everyone from Hidden Block is in there too, but you can't date any of them. Anyways, before any of the dating can begin, there's a bit of story. The game is about a transfer student named Hana who runs into the Normal Boots Club at school, where instead of guys who make videos, they're a group of competitive gamers, and somehow the most popular guys in school, and the entire point of the game is to get into a successful relationship with one of them and become a part of the club. You can choose from one of 7 Normal Boots members, including Peanut Butter Gamer, JonTron, Pro Jared, The Completionist, Paul from Continue, Satchbag, and Shane from Did You Know Gaming. Anyways, Hana arrives at the school, and it isn't long before she meets her roommate Mai, who will be there for Hana in each of the routes. Well, I believe it was the other way around in at least one of them. Each route has its own story, and most of them are really interesting. Also, each route has a different difficulty, with PBG's being the easiest non-secret route, and Shane's being the hardest. No matter which route you take, there's plenty of humor included, which will probably get a laugh or two out of you. It's a really good visual novel, and you should definitely check it out, whether you're a fan of Normal Boots and or Hidden Block. Heck, even check it out if you've never watched any of their videos. Number 4. Heartache 101. There are a lot of things to do in this one. Each of the dateable characters has so many story branches that I doubt I'll ever get them all. This one plays a bit different from most visual novels though. Not only do you have to read through text, but you also gotta play a little board game. When playing on a board map, the first options the player has are move and wait. Move is exactly as it sounds, and so is wait. When you move, the number of spaces you move is generated by chance. Choosing to wait, you'll just stand still and the girls on the map will move around. As you get further, you'll have some more options on the board map parts of the game. You'll be able to use items that you pick up at item spaces, as well as use special moves that you obtained from spaces on the map. When you walk into one of the girls on the map, as in land on the space that they're in, you'll trigger an event, whether story-driven or just a quick, what do you want to say to her thing. If you land on an arrow, you'll be given a couple of options. A certain amount of spaces that you can move back or forward if you want. The amount for forward and back isn't always going to be consistent though. Landing on a question mark will trigger a random event. It can be something like an amount of spaces you'll have to move, wiping chalk stains off of yourself to look better, losing money to irresponsible classmates, as well as many other things. Lastly are bugs. If you land on them, you'll get sick and have to spend the rest of the day at home. There is also a part-time job every now and then that plays similarly to Pac-Man, and it's near impossible to win. You're going to need to do this job so you can earn some money, which you can spend on someone else or yourself. As for the story, you get to name the protagonist, who is assumed to be a male sophomore in high school. The protagonist ends up in a competition with his childhood friend Mickey to see who can get in a relationship first. Both Mickey and the protagonist have someone their eyes are set on, but you can change that if you want. There are many more characters you can date, and that includes Mickey. Anyways, when you beat the game, you can come back and try to get the other several endings and story branches. It's worth coming back just to see what happens if your actions are a little different. You can even add your own characters and story to the game. If you're not that creative, you can download custom characters and story to the game. When you've cleared the game once, you'll unlock Clean Mode, which will allow you to play through the game using custom characters only except in the intro. That's the only exception. There's too much content for me to cover it all, but that's exactly what makes this visual novel so enjoyable. Number 3. Driftwood. Not much to say about gameplay here, since it plays a lot like a lot of the other visual novels I've mentioned previously. Anyways, the game follows a guy named Marcus. He's living a normal life, and he finally gets the girl he likes named Michaela to go out on a date with him. However, something goes wrong, the two end up witnessing something they shouldn't have, and Marcus ends up shot in the shoulder. After that, he ends up in the hospital. His parents ended up getting worried about his safety, so they decided to send him to another school, meaning he would no longer go to school with Michaela. However, if he had stayed, he wouldn't be going to school with her anymore anyway, since Michaela and her family had to move. Marcus ends up going to the new school where he meets several people, which include Yuko, who helps him around school, Ellen, a shy girl he was partnered with for a school project, Kyrie, who helps him work with Ellen, and she also plays a lot of video games, Nora, who's in the culinary club, and Taran, who's a bit of a bitch. And each of them has their own route, or rather, will. Yep, the game's not finished as of the moment I wrote this script, but the time I've sunk into it so far was well worth it. The characters are likable, the story is good, and there's a lot of humor. There were many lines of dialogue that made me laugh in this one. Now, if you've played a lot of visual novels, you may have noticed something about the story and how it's a lot like another game. Number 2. Katawa Shoujo. More Japanese names that I'll likely mess up, isn't that just great? Anyways, Katawa Shoujo is another dating sim, but it happens to be about disabled students, and I'm not entirely sure how to feel about its existence. Anyways, it starts off with the main character Hisao outside in the cold because he was summoned by a letter sent by someone who would soon meet up with him and confess her feelings. Unfortunately, Hisao ended up suffering a heart attack immediately after. He ends up spending 4 months in the hospital where he finds out he has arrhythmia, a condition in which the heart beats with an irregular or abnormal rhythm. And the more time he spends in there, less people visit him. Hisao is later informed that it would be best for him if he were sent to another school, specifically one for students with disabilities. Hisao is pretty much against the idea, but he goes anyways. At this school, Hisao ends up meeting all kinds of interesting people, but I'm only going to mention the main characters. There's Hanako, who's literally been very badly burned, Lily, who's blind, Shizune, who's deaf, Emi, who doesn't have legs, and Rin, who doesn't have arms. The other major characters include Misha, who speaks very loudly and acts as Shizune's translator, as well as Kenji, who's also blind but is always going on about feminist conspiracies. The first chapter of the visual novel is Hisao getting used to his new school as well as interacting with all these characters. The choices the player makes will affect the outcome, like which girl's route they're taking, or they can just not take any of their routes. Plenty of interesting things happen, including some stuff that's not safe for work. There is a disable adult content feature, but it only half-asses it. It's quite disappointing for someone that isn't into seeing nudes. Heck, I don't even like the fact that there's adult content in a game about disabled students, but it's from 4chan, so I really don't know what I was supposed to expect. When it gets to those moments in the game, I'll admit that at least a few times it fit the story of the route, but it just felt out of place in most of them. Despite all this, it's a good visual novel, and I definitely recommend it if you're old enough to play and can handle the inappropriate content. As for why I rate this higher than Driftwood, it's because Katawa Shoujo has much more emotion to it. Number 1. Lucid 9 Inciting Incident. Remember how I retracted a previous statement? Well, this game is the reason why. I also consider this one to be the best out of them all so far, because of the excellent writing and the amount of emotion in it. The game takes place in a fictional city in the year 2018 where you play as Yama Ishimoto, a high school student who'd like to keep his life free of school drama and difficult choices. Unfortunately, an eccentric detective blazes into his life, alerting him of a string of brutal murders at his school. As he gets further in investigating this, he brings himself and his friends closer to danger. This story creates some really interesting plot points which involve the deaths of a few characters whose names I will not reveal. This game has plenty of likable characters too. There's Yama's best friend Rui, who's always been there for him since he can't really take care of himself. Then there's his other close friend who recently came back into his life, Misaki, who ended up with a job as a model. Then there's Elizabeth, a perfectionist that annoys Yama, and next there's Akira, who probably has a few screws loose. Eri, a bit of a loner who's constantly picked on by other students because of rumors. Yahiko, who has even more screws loose. Masato, who really wants Yama to join track. Jiro? These names are killing me. He's the counselor and dorm manager or something like that. Then there's Natsuki, who's very mysterious. And lastly, the detective Shigeru? Anyway, she's a bit rude. It feels a bit weird to go back and forth from happy and lighthearted moments with these characters to completely dark moments, or in other words, the deaths. However, once far enough into the game, the characters get stuck in depressing as well as paranoid moods. The backstory combined with the unfortunate present events are just painful and caused my eyes to water at least a couple of times. Overall, the story and the results can be quite depressing. No matter what happens, not everyone will survive. There is truly no good ending, just like real life. Not only does the situation get even worse, but mysteries are left unsolved, and we're left hanging. However, there is a continuation in the works, so look forward to that if you check this game out. That is, if you can handle a game as dark and depressing as this. And there you have it, my top 8 visual novels. Nearly all are on here for their fantastic story, but a couple are mainly here for gameplay elements. All of them are enjoyable experiences, and you should definitely check them out. However, both Heartache 101 and Katawa Shoujo I'd recommend mainly to people over 18. I didn't mention the NSFW content in Heartache 101 because it's pretty insignificant. It's really stupid, but one location has nude posters all over the place. Anyways, that's all I have to say about these. Thanks for watching and hearing what I had to say. I appreciate it. You know what else I appreciate? When people click that like button or subscribe. I also like comments. Anyways, if you're interested in more of my content, check out these videos. If you want to know what I'm up to, follow me on my social media accounts. Links are in the description below. Now have a good day, and goodbye!